Welcome to the deep dive. We take compelling research, stacks of it sometimes, and we really try to boil it down to the most surprising, actionable insights for you.
That's the goal.
And today we are doing a really deep excavation, you could say, into something everyone thinks they get: wealth.
Right. But do they really?
Exactly. We're not talking lottery wins or, tech billionaires flying to space. We're unpacking the myths, the real story behind America's everyday millionaires.
The ones who built it themselves, often in just one generation.
Yeah, based on some really extensive research profiling these financially independent Americans, what does that success actually look like? And maybe more importantly, why do so many people earning high incomes? Well, why do they fail to get there?
And that question, that's really the heart of this deep dive, isn't it? We have to nail the definition right up front because, honestly, most people get it fundamentally wrong.
Okay, so what is it?
Wealth is simply what you accumulate. That's it. It's not what you spend. High income, great start, but it means almost nothing for independence if it's all just flowing out the door again.
You mean like earning big but spending bigger?
Precisely. You could earn, say, $500,000 a year, fantastic income. But if you spend $490,000 on lifestyle, on consumption, you're barely independent, financially speaking. So our mission today really is to find those common threads, the repeatable denominators among the people who do successfully build wealth, usually within their own lifetime.
And what are those threads looking like?
Well, it boils down to a mix of things, not just one silver bullet. It's hard work, sure, but also systematic planning, perseverance, definitely perseverance. And maybe above all, self-discipline, applied consistently, year after year, decade after decade.
That consistency piece sounds key. The numbers really back up why this discussion is so crucial, too. The scale of personal wealth mentioned in the source material, it's staggering. Over $22 trillion back when this study was done.
A huge number.
A huge number, yeah. Yet most Americans, not wealthy, not even close, really. Nearly half of that entire $22 trillion is owned by just, get this, 3.5% of households.
Wow. That's concentrated.
Extremely concentrated. So who are we focusing on then? Not necessarily the super, super rich.
Right. No, exactly. We're zooming in on the 95% of millionaires who have a net worth somewhere between, say, $1 million and $10 million.
All right.
That's the critical group for this conversation.
Yeah.
Because that level of financial independence, it's actually attainable. It's something people can achieve if they follow a certain path, a disciplined path. It's not just luck or inheritance for most of them.
Right. So let's start by tackling that image problem, the myth versus the reality. What does the average person picture when they hear millionaire? For me, I immediately think, glossy magazine vibes.
Like what specific?
Someone driving a brand new, probably imported luxury car, leased, of course. Wearing expensive suits, maybe custom tailored, and definitely sporting some kind of watch that costs, well, more than my groceries for a year. The high-status consumer. Like that trust officer type described in the research.
Exactly. That's the stereotype. Society, advertising, it all tells us that wealth must be displayed. You have to look the part.
Yeah.
But that expectation, it's not just misleading. It's often financially disastrous for the people who buy into it. The reality we found in the research, the millionaire next door profile, it's almost the complete opposite.
Okay, give us an example.
Take Miss T and her husband, profiled in the source. Their life is described as, well, almost aggressively normal. They're wealthy, yes, but she wears a simple Timex watch. Her husband, a Seiko. A Seiko, which, interestingly, the research found is the #1 watch brand among actual millionaires. Not Rolex, not Patek Philippe.
It's Seiko.
Okay, isn't it? And they don't shop on Fifth Avenue. They buy clothes at places like Dillard's, JCPenney, maybe TJ Maxx. Their house, pretty modest, valued around $275,000 at the time.
So they're wealthy because they don't look wealthy.
In large part, yes. They've accumulated significant wealth precisely because they resist that immense pressure to look the part, to consume conspicuously.
That contrast is just fascinating. It reminds me of that great anecdote about the Texan diesel engine rebuilder. Super successful guy in his field.
Oh, yeah? A powerhouse?
Yeah.
But how did he present himself?
Totally low-key. Drove a 10-year-old car, wore jeans, lived in a regular neighborhood with, postal workers and firefighters. And the story goes, when his British partners flew in for some big deal, they actually mistook him for one of his own truck drivers.
That story is just, it's the whole lesson ramped up, isn't it? There's that Texan saying, big hat, no cattle.
Right, I've heard that.
It describes perfectly that high-status consumer. Looks incredibly wealthy, spends like crazy to maintain the image, but has zero real net worth underneath. That's the UAW profile, the under-accumulator of wealth, which we'll definitely get into.
So the diesel guy was the opposite.
Exactly. No big hat, no fancy display, but he had a lot of cattle, real net worth. His success was internal, built on accumulation, not external validation through spending. And that ability, that conscious choice to disconnect your self-worth from the things you buy, that's probably the first and maybe the hardest habit to master on the road to wealth.
Okay, so if they're not blowing money on status symbols, what are they doing? Statistically speaking, what does this typical millionaire look like based on the research data?
Well, the portrait is pretty clear. We're typically looking at someone around, say, 57 years old, usually male, usually married. But here's a huge point, maybe the biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
A stunning 80% of them are first-generation affluent.
80%, so they didn't inherit it.
Nope. They built it themselves, earned it, accumulated it. They weren't just handed the keys to the kingdom.
Wow, that changes the whole picture.
It absolutely does. And that self-made nature, it shapes their entire financial mindset. They're builders, you see, not just maintainers of inherited status. Their occupations really highlight this too.
How so?
About 2/3 of the working millionaires in the study are self-employed. Entrepreneurs, maybe professionals like doctors or accountants running their own practice.
2/3. That seems really high considering self-employed people are, what, less than 20% of the workforce overall?
Exactly. They're vastly overrepresented among millionaires. And the thinking is, it's because they capture the profits from their labor and their business growth directly. They own the engine of wealth creation.
Makes sense. Are they all in glamorous fields? Tech startups, finance?
Actually, no. That's another myth busted. Very often they're in what the research calls dull normal businesses.
Dull normal. Like what?
Think welding contractors, mobile home park owners, pest control services, rice farmers, auctioneers. You know, stable, necessary, but definitely not flashy industries.
Okay. Why those types of businesses?
Well, several reasons. They often lack the intense venture capital-fueled competition you see in, say, tech. The demand is often steadier, more predictable. They generate consistent cash flow, which can then be systematically accumulated and reinvested. It's less about hitting a home run and more about consistent singles and doubles over a long period.
Got it. So let's talk numbers. What's their financial snapshot look like? Median net worth.
The median net worth for this group was $1.6 million.
Okay. And their income.
Median realized annual income was about $131,000. Now, the average income was higher, around $247,000, but that gets skewed upwards by some very high earners in the group. The median gives a better picture for the typical person.
$131,000 income, $1.6 million net worth. That income seems lower than I might have guessed for a millionaire.
It often is. And here's the statistical proof of their discipline. On average, their total annual realized income, the money they actually take out and make available for spending, is less than 7% of their total wealth.
Less than 7%.
Yes, let that sink in. If they have $1.6 million in assets, they're living on less than $112,000 of it per year. The vast majority stays invested, stays working for them, often growing tax-deferred or tax-favored. That is the absolute definition of living well below your means.
That's a massive gap between wealth and spending. What about where they live? Big fancy houses?
Mostly no. 97% are homeowners, which is high, but the average home value was surprisingly modest, around $320,000 in the study.
$320,000 average for millionaires.
Yep, and this is critical. A modest home value keeps their fixed cost, what we call domestic overhead, low. Very low compared to high-income non-millionaires.
Yeah.
This frees up enormous amounts of capital over time that can be invested instead of being poured into mortgage payments, property taxes, and upkeep on a massive house.
And they tend to stay put, right?
Absolutely. Incredible stability. About half of them had lived in the same home for more than 20 years. Think about the benefits, paying off the mortgage, building equity, avoiding transaction costs, and often significant tax-free appreciation on that primary residence.
Okay, modest homes. What about cars? We touched on that.
Same pattern. They overwhelmingly drive American-made cars. Only a small minority drive the current model a year, and leasing is quite rare. Again, it's about prioritizing utility and conserving capital, not chasing status symbols that depreciate like rocks.
It paints a picture of, well, being pretty careful with money. But are they educated? Or is it all just business savvy?
Oh, they're highly educated as a group. About 80% are college graduates, and a significant chunk have advanced degrees, masters, PhDs, MDs, law degrees.
So education is important.
Very. But it's interesting where they choose to spend heavily on education. Over half, 55%, send their children to private schools.
Ah, so they will spend big there.
Yes, but notice the pattern. They invest heavily in their children's future, earning potential, their intellectual development, rather than spending excessively on current material consumption for themselves or their kids. It's strategic investment, even in education spending.
That distinction is really interesting. Okay, this leads nicely into how we actually measure wealth accumulation, right? This PA versus UAW idea.
Exactly. Because just looking at income tells you almost nothing about wealth. We need a way to measure how effectively someone converts their income into actual net worth relative to their peers. That's where the wealth equation comes in.
Okay, lay it on us. The wealth equation.
It's surprisingly simple, but powerful. You take someone's age, multiply it by their total annual realized income, and then divide that whole thing by 10.
Age times income divided by 10.
Correct. That number gives you their expected net worth. It's the benchmark what someone at that age and income level should typically have accumulated if they're average.
So if you hit that number, you're doing okay average-wise.
You're an AEW, an average accumulator of wealth. Now, if your actual net worth is roughly twice that expected value, or even more,
And you're doing great.
then you're a PAW, a prodigious accumulator of wealth. These are the folks who are really efficient at building wealth. On the flip side, if your net worth is only half or less than what the formula predicts, then you're a UAW, an under-accumulator of wealth. Your earnings may be even earning a lot, but you're not keeping it. You're not building wealth effectively. And the difference is stark PAWs typically have at least 4 times the wealth of UAWs in the same age and income group.
4 times. Okay, let's make that concrete. Give me an example calculation.
Sure. Let's say you're 40 years old and your annual realized income is $100,000.
Okay.
Age 40 times $100,000 income is $4 million. Divide by 10. Your expected net worth is $400,000. That's the benchmark.
Right.
Now, if you actually only have, say, $200,000 saved up,
Yeah.
you're a UAW. You're significantly underperforming your potential. You're likely spending way too much relative to your peers.
And if I have $800,000?
Now you're a PAW. You're accumulating wealth at twice the expected rate. This metric just drives home the point. Income is only the raw material. Accumulation, that's the actual skill, the game you need to win.
Okay, so income isn't destiny. Let's look at those case studies you mentioned. They really highlight this difference, don't they? Mr. Richards, the mobile home dealer.
Yes, Mr. Miller, Bubba Richards, age 50, income around $90,200. According to the formula, his expected net worth should be about $451,000.
Okay, that's the benchmark.
But Bubba, he's a classic PAW. His actual net worth is $1.1 million. More than double what's expected. He's a wealth-building machine.
$1.1 million on a $90K income at age 50. Impressive. Now contrast him with the attorney, Mr. Ford.
James H. Ford II, similar age, 51. Actually earns slightly more income, about $92,330. So his expected net worth is even a bit higher, around $471,000.
So he should be wealthier, right? Or at least comparable.
You'd think so. But Mr. Ford is a UAW, his actual net worth. A surprisingly low $226,511.
Wow. So, similar age, slightly higher income, way less wealth. The mobile home dealer has almost 5 times the net worth of the attorney. How does that even happen? A law degree versus a mobile home business.
It comes back to that cost of playing the part, the UAW trap. Mr. Ford, the attorney, feels obligated, or perhaps chooses to spend significantly more to maintain that expected upper-middle-class professional lifestyle.
Like what kind of spending?
Think expensive imported cars may be leased, high-quality, pricey suits worn daily, significant dues for country clubs or social organizations, all things deemed necessary to project the image associated with his profession.
So consumption eats his potential wealth.
Precisely. UAWs like Mr. Ford prioritize current consumption and displaying status. PAWs like Mr. Richards prioritize strategic accumulation and are willing to defer gratification. Mr. Ford is essentially trapped by lifestyle expectations tied to his job title and income level.
This whole high income, low net worth thing, it seems like a real crisis for some people. The comparison between the two doctors really drives this home too, right? Dr. South and Dr. North.
Oh, absolutely. A stark contrast.
Yeah.
Both physicians, similar high incomes. But Dr. South, he's the classic UAW. High income, yes, but relatively little wealth, accumulated only about $400,000 net worth. He spends massively, invests little, and seems constantly caught in that cycle of lifestyle inflation.
What's he spending on that's so different?
Well, Dr. South is just hemorrhaging cash on things designed to signal success, particularly fixed costs. His annual mortgage payments, $107,000.
$107,000 just on the mortgage.
Just the mortgage.
Yeah.
Way, way above what a typical PAW would tolerate. And add to that nearly $48,000 a year in club dues, country clubs, social clubs, you name it.
Okay, that's huge overhead.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And because he prioritizes this incredibly expensive lifestyle, what's the result? He's constantly worried. The research notes he fears his standard of living might collapse. He's concerned his very high income still won't be enough to satisfy his family's expensive habits that they've become accustomed to. He looks rich, maybe feels rich moment to moment, but he's living with significant underlying financial anxiety.
So he's on a treadmill. What about Dr. North, the Paul?
Dr. North is the flip side. He demonstrates true financial strength. His net worth, $7.5 million.
$7.5 million, compared to Dr. South's $400.
Yep, nearly 20 times wealthier, on a similar income path. How? He and his wife consciously built wealth from the start. They had a strict savings rule, a commitment to saving a percentage of their income even when it was small. And critically, they maintained that discipline years later when their income became very large.
So the discipline stuck. What about his spending? Mortgage, clubs?
Completely different scale.
Yep.
His mortgage payment is only $14,600 a year. Club dues, about $8,000. Minimal overhead compared to his assets and income.
Wow.
And because his wealth accumulation far outpaces his spending, guess what? He has far fewer financial worries. His standard of living isn't a source of anxiety, it's secure.
This really highlights what the research calls the advanced degree paradox, doesn't it?
It really does. It seems counterintuitive, but for people earning high income, say, over $100,000, the data often shows a negative correlation between having advanced degrees, like law or medicine, and how efficiently they accumulate wealth.
Negative. More education leads to less wealth accumulation. Why?
Two main reasons seem to be at play. First, the obvious one. Professionals often start earning serious money later in life, maybe saddled with significant student debt. They just have fewer years in the accumulation game.
Okay, the late start makes sense. What's the second reason?
This one's more subtle, but maybe more powerful. It's those societal and peer expectations again. Doctors, lawyers, executives, they're often expected to look successful.
The big hat.
Exactly. That expectation imposes really high domestic overhead, the big house, the luxury cars, the private schools, the clubs. It forces UAWs like Dr. South onto that relentless consumption treadmill, where they're always spending just to keep up appearances, leaving little left over to actually invest and build real wealth.
So the fancy degree can actually be a financial liability if you buy into the expected lifestyle. Okay, so if high income isn't the answer, and high status can be a trap, what is the foundation? It sounds like it comes down to defense, frugality.
Defense is absolutely crucial. If generating income is playing offense, then controlling your spending, frugality, planning, discipline is playing great defense. And you can't win without great defense. The research shows millionaires are incredibly disciplined here. We mentioned 95% are married.
Right.
And in about 70% of those millionaire households, while maybe the husband is the primary income earner playing great offense, the couple together plays great defense. Frugality is often a team sport in these families.
So it's a shared value. How does this frugality show up in the data, like specific spending habits?
Because the data is really specific. The majority of these millionaires had never spent $5,000 for a watch. Think about that compared to the stereotypes.
Ever. Wow.
50%, half of them, had never spent $140 or more for a single pair of shoes.
Even the wealthy ones.
Even the wealthy ones. And when it came to buying suits, the typical self-made millionaire spent around $360. They recognize the need for professional appearance, but it's about utility, not designer labels. Compare that to inheritors of wealth. They spend, on average, over $600 for a suit, often needing to maintain a certain inherited image.
That suit example is telling. It's functional versus flashy.
Exactly. And sometimes that frugality is even a strategic choice, like with Johnny Lucas, the millionaire who built a janitorial contracting business.
What did he do?
He deliberately avoided buying expensive custom-tailored suits. Why? He said he didn't need to impress Wall Street analysts. He needed to relate to his employees, his janitorial staff. He didn't want them thinking he was getting rich off their backs just to fund a $1,000 suit. His frugality was smart business.
That's a great point. And you mentioned the spouse is often key.
Critically important. While the paws themselves are frugal, the research often found their spouses were even more frugal. They acted like the household's CFO, the ultimate guardian of the family capital.
Any examples of that?
The anecdote about the millionaire's wife cutting coupons is just perfect. Her husband's company had just gone public. He gives her $8 million worth of stock.
$8 million, okay.
And what does she do? She's sitting at the kitchen table later that week, diligently cutting out 25 and 50-cent coupons from the newspaper for groceries.
After getting $8 million in stock. Wow.
It shows so clearly that for them, frugality isn't about need. They didn't need to save 50 cents on canned peas. It's about habit. It's about a fundamental respect for capital itself. They understood that building and keeping wealth requires constant vigilance, constant defense, no matter how much you have. You can't sustain big spending and big accumulation simultaneously for long.
That mindset seems crucial. Okay, so beyond just not spending impulsively, does this discipline extend to actual planning, budgeting?
Oh, absolutely. Planning is a huge differentiator. The research showed that most millionaires operate on an annual budget. In fact, the ratio was something like 120 millionaires who budget for every 100 who don't.
So budgeting is more common than not among them.
Significantly more common. And this structured approach really sets them apart from high-income non-millionaires. Get this. Almost two-thirds of the millionaires knew exactly how much their household spent annually on the big categories: food, clothing, shelter.
They tracked it.
They tracked it. Compare that to high-income non-millionaires. Only about 35% had a clear idea of where their money was actually going. The rest were flying blind, financially speaking.
That lack of awareness probably explains a lot of underaccumulation right there. What about those millionaires who don't formally budget? How do they manage?
They often use an even more powerful systemic strategy. It's the classic pay-yourself-first method, but applied rigorously.
How does that work in practice?
They essentially automate their savings and investing. They mandate that a minimum percentage of their realized income, often 15% or more, gets invested before any bills are paid, before any discretionary spending happens.
So they create artificial scarcity.
Exactly. They force themselves to live on the remainder. This ensures that capital is always being set aside, planted as seeds for future growth, rather than being immediately consumed as fruit. It builds the accumulation muscle automatically.
That discipline really shows up in their credit card habits too, right? Compared to the UAWs.
Huge difference. Remember Robert and Judy, that high-income, low-net-worth couple mentioned? They had 14 credit cards, and they openly admitted that consumption controlled them, not the other way around.
14 cards. Wow. How do millionaires use plastic?
Differently. They aren't chasing status points or flashing fancy cards. Sure, Visa and MasterCard are widely used for convenience, about 59% and 56% respectively, but what's really telling is which other cards are popular.
Go on.
Cards from retailers aim squarely at the middle market. Sears was held by 43% of millionaires. JCPenney by over 30%.
Sears and Penny's cards. More popular than Amex.
Far more popular than the high-status cards. American Express Platinum, only 6.2%. Diners Club, a mere 3.4%. It shows their shopping habits aligned with their frugal mindset. They prioritize value and utility from mainstream retailers over the prestige associated with high-end stores and status cards.
That's fascinating. They're shopping where regular folks shop. Okay, let's pivot to some specific status traps. Big ticket items, like cars. You said most buy American, few buy new models.
Right. The overall split was about 63% buying new versus 37% buying used. But again, the real insight isn't just what they buy, but how they approach the purchase, especially the used car buyers.
Tell me about the used car buyers, that 37%.
Well, within that group, there's a specific segment, about 19.5% of all millionaires identified as used vehicle-prone shoppers. These folks absolutely epitomize the PAW mindset.
How so?
They are intensely price-sensitive. They'll often spend months researching, shopping, comparing, negotiating to get the absolute rock-bottom best deal. They show an incredible aversion to overpaying, even by a little bit.
They really work for that discount.
They really do. And to get this specific group, the obsessive used car bargain hunters. They have the highest wealth-to-income ratio of any millionaire segment studied. $17.20 of net worth for every $1 of income they realize annually.
17 to 1. Because they're so careful?
It seems directly correlated. Their aggressive bargain hunting isn't just for cars. They apply it everywhere, actively seeking out discount stores for clothes, household goods, you name it. They treat saving money like earning money.
And the irony you mentioned.
The deep irony is that the average non-wealthy person is often less likely to comparison shop, haggle aggressively, and to negotiate hard for major purchases than the average millionaire is.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe they feel negotiating is beneath them, or they don't think the savings are worth the effort. But the millionaire sees it differently. That discount isn't just money saved, it's capital preserved. It's fuel for their wealth engine. That defensive mindset is always switched on. I love that quote from one millionaire about his car.
Which one?
He said his beat-up, older car was the last one that would ever be stolen out of the airport parking lot. Utility over vanity, plain and simple.
Okay, so cars are one visible trap. What about the less visible ones, like where you live? The high-status neighborhood trap.
Oh, this is a huge one. A silent wealth killer for many high earners. Remember we said the average millionaire realizes only about 6.7% of their wealth as annual income to live on.
Right, they keep most of it invested.
Now, think about their non-affluent neighbors living in those same expensive, high-status areas. The UAWs who stretched to buy the big house to look successful. To afford the mortgage, the taxes, the upkeep, the associated lifestyle in that zip code, they often have to realize more than 40% of their net worth as taxable income each year.
40%, compared to less than 7 for the millionaires.
Exactly. The neighborhood itself becomes a massive consumption engine, a social tax. These non-affluent neighbors bought the house hoping it was a step towards wealth, but the high cost forces them onto a treadmill. They had to maximize their realized income, meaning they also maximize their taxes just to make ends meet and maintain the lifestyle that fits the neighborhood. This leaves virtually nothing left over for actual investment and capital accumulation. It stalls their journey to financial independence indefinitely. They're trapped, earning high, spending high, and accumulating little.
So the address is actively working against their financial goals. Is there a rule of thumb here?
The research suggests a pretty stark rule for wealth building. If your goal is true financial independence, never buy a home that requires a mortgage, more than twice your household's total annual realized income.
No more than 2 times income for the mortgage. That seems restrictive compared to what banks might offer.
It is restrictive. It prioritizes financial flexibility and the ability to invest over maximizing house size or neighborhood prestige. It keeps your fixed overhead low. We saw the opposite in that story of the young stockbroker.
What happened with him?
He was earning a good income, $84,000, and was advised to buy a modest home, according to this rule. But he refused. He explicitly said he didn't want to live in a neighborhood with truckers and construction workers.
Oh.
Yeah. He chose the status address over the path to wealth accumulation. He traded long-term financial potential for short-term social vanity, a classic UAW move.
Okay, these individual choices, frugality, planning, avoiding static traps, clearly build wealth. But what about family? How does giving money to adult kids play into this idea, economic outpatient care, EOC?
EOC. This is a really complex and, according to the research, often counterproductive area. EOC basically refers to substantial financial gifts and ongoing acts of kindness subsidies, really that affluent parents give to their adult children or grandchildren.
So not just birthday checks, but significant help.
Right, we're talking major support. Study found that over 46% of affluent parents give at least $15,000 a year in EOC.
Nearly half of them. What form does this usually take?
All sorts of things. Paying for grandchildren's private school tuition, that was 43% of givers. Covering adult children's graduate school costs 32%. Providing down payments or direct financial help for buying a home, a big one, 59%.
It sounds like parents just trying to help their kids get ahead or maybe ease their own burden later.
The motivations are often good, absolutely. Helping kids who seem to be struggling, maybe trying to reduce the size of their taxable estate eventually. But the outcomes, the research reveals a really damaging paradox here.
What's the paradox?
2 things. First, the parents who provide a lot of EOC end up with significantly less wealth themselves compared to their peers whose kids are financially independent. That's maybe obvious. Giving away money reduces your own pile.
Okay, makes sense. What's the other part?
This is the more troubling part. The adult children who receive more EOC tend to accumulate less wealth themselves.
Wait, getting more money makes them less wealthy. How does that work?
It seems to breed dependence and discourage the development of financial discipline and self-reliance. The EOC acts like a cushion that removes the incentive, or maybe the necessity, to budget, save, invest, and build wealth on their own.
Can you give an example of this?
The case of Lamar and Mary is a perfect illustration. Lamar is an administrator, earns only about $60,000, Mary's a housewife, no earned income, yet they live this very comfortable upper middle class life. Nice house, expensive cars, private school tuition.
How do they afford that on $60?
They don't. It's almost entirely subsidized by Mary's affluent parents through ongoing EOC. Her parents frequently help with mortgage payments, cover tuition bills, and even provide funds for a brand new foreign luxury car every 3 years, usually by gifting stock, which Lamar and Mary then sell immediately to fund the purchase.
So their entire lifestyle is basically artificial, funded by handouts.
Completely artificial. It bears no relation to their own earning capacity or financial discipline. It's a lifestyle built on dependency.
And this EOC has psychological effects too, the montage effect.
Yes, that's a fascinating concept from the research. Recipients of substantial EOC often suffer from this montage effect. They start to blur the lines. They don't fully distinguish between their own limited resources and their parents' much larger pool of capital.
So they see mom and dad's money as kind of their own.
Exactly. They internalize their parents' wealth as if it were their own personal income stream, something that's just there to be spent to fund their consumption rather than capital that needs to be preserved or grown. The research had this striking image.
Yeah.
An adult son, heavily subsidized by his wealthy parents, was apparently screaming in protest when his parents decided to donate a commercial property they owned to a college. He yelled, "That's my property too!" He genuinely felt entitled to their capital to fund his lifestyle indefinitely.
Wow. That's quite an entitlement. Is there statistical proof this EOC hurts the recipient's wealth building?
Yes, the evidence was pretty compelling. The researchers looked at 10 different occupational categories and compared the net worth of adult children who received regular cash gifts versus those in the same jobs who didn't.
And the results?
In 8 out of the 10 categories, and this included high-paying professions like attorneys and accountants, the adult children who received EOC had significantly smaller net worths and often lower annual incomes than their peers who didn't receive gifts.
So the handout actually correlated with lower achievement.
It certainly seemed to. For example, attorneys who received regular gifts had, on average, only 62% of the net worth of attorneys who didn't receive such gifts. It appears that reliance on the EOC cushion genuinely dulls the drive, the ambition, the need to achieve true financial self-sufficiency.
It removes the struggle and maybe the lessons learned from it. This seems related to the idea of economic inpatient care you mentioned, Mrs. BPF.
Right, that's taking EOC to the extreme. Mrs. BPF was an entrepreneur, late 30s, but her entire business, her entire livelihood was essentially bankrolled by her wealthy parents. It wasn't just outpatient care. She was fully admitted, financially speaking. She lived at home, rent-free. Her parents covered all her business losses and operating costs. And on top of that, they gave her a $60,000 annual allowance, just for personal spending. Any real financial risk or consequence was completely removed from her life.
So she had zero pressure. How did she handle her finances then? Was she frugal?
Quite the opposite. Despite this massive safety net, her personal spending was described as reckless. She dropped $45,000 on a new car without even shopping around for a deal, bought a $5,000 watch, spent over $20,000 a year on clothes, and racked up over $7,000 in credit card interest alone in 1 year.
All while being totally subsidized. What was the psychological impact?
This is key. Eliminating the financial risk didn't lead to peace of mind. It led to fragility and fear. Mrs. BPF reported having 12 major financial and personal fears. Things like her business failing anyway, her parents dying, their estate getting heavily taxed.
12 major fears. How does that compare?
It was 4 times the number of major fears reported by typical self-made, self-sustaining, affluent business owners profiled in the same study.
So the struggle actually builds strength.
That's the conclusion the research draws. The struggle for financial self-sufficiency, dealing with setbacks, overcoming obstacles. The process builds courage, resilience, and confidence. EOC, especially at the inpatient level, eliminates the struggle, bypasses the learning, and paradoxically produces dependency and chronic anxiety.
Okay, so great defense. Frugality planning is essential, and dependency, EOC, is detrimental. Let's flip back to offense, how PAWs actively grow their capital. It starts with how they spend their time.
Yes, time allocation is a critical, often overlooked element of wealth building. PAWs, the prodigious accumulators, spend significantly more of their time actively planning and managing their investments compared to UAWs, the underaccumulators.
How much more time? Do we have numbers?
We do. The study found that middle-income PAWs spent, on average, about 8.4 hours per month specifically on investment-related activities, researching, planning, tracking, adjusting.
8 or 9 hours a month. Okay, how about UAWs?
UAWs in the same income bracket spend only about 4.6 hours per month on this. That's almost half as much.
So PAWs dedicate, what, maybe 1.2% of their waking hours to managing their money, while UAWs spend closer to 0.5%, like 1 hour out of every 160.
Exactly. It doesn't sound like a huge difference in hours per month, but over years and decades, that consistent focus adds up tremendously. PAWs are consciously choosing to invest their time in activities that directly enhance their wealth. They treat managing their personal finances like running a business, something that requires active attention.
And where does that focused time lead them in terms of investments? What kinds of assets do PAWs favor?
Their focus naturally directs their capital toward appreciating assets, and often assets that help minimize their realized income, which in turn minimizes taxes.
Like what?
Things like investments in privately held businesses, often their own, commercial real estate, farmland, stock portfolios held in tax-deferred accounts like 401ks or IRAs, assets designed to grow capital over the long term.
And UAWs, where is their money tied up?
UAWs, reflecting their consumption focus, tend to hold a much larger percentage of their net worth in rapidly depreciating assets. Think expensive cars, boats, RVs, maybe second homes that are primarily for lifestyle, not investment, assets that lose value quickly and often cost money to maintain.
So pause invests in things that grow, UAWs and things that shrink. What about their investment strategy? Are pause sophisticated traders?
Generally, no. They're not darting in and out of the market. They tend to be focused, buy and hold investors. Crucially, they often invest heavily in areas they know and understand well.
Like Dr. North.
Exactly. Dr. North, the paw physician, invested significantly in healthcare and medical industry stocks because he understood that sector deeply. He also bought agricultural land in his region because he understood farming and local real estate. Auctioneers in the study often invested heavily in real estate because they understood property values from their daily work. They stick to their circle of competence.
And they tend to manage it themselves.
Very often, yes. They act as their own primary financial advisor, doing their own research, making their own decisions. This also helps them minimize transaction costs and advisory fees, which can be a major drag on returns over time.
Contrast that with Dr. South, the UAW doctor.
Oh, the contrast is painful.
Yeah.
Dr. South, despite being intelligent, outsourced everything. He had a relatively small portfolio, around $200,000, spread across 4 different brokers. And in 1 year, he spent a staggering $35,000 just on advisory fees and trading commissions for that portfolio.
$35,000 in fees on a $200 K portfolio. That's huge.
And was it performing well?
No. The research indicated it was performing poorly. He was paying exorbitant fees for fragmented, ineffective, and ultimately bad advice. A classic UAW mistake, throwing money at a problem without understanding it or taking ownership.
This really highlights the importance of vetting any financial advisor you do hire. The Martin Method story nails this, right? Oh, the Martin Method is brilliant. It perfectly encapsulates the paw mindset of treating your household like a business that demands competence. Mr. Martin, a self-made multi-millionaire investor.
What was his trick?
When brokers would cold call him, pitching their services, he had a standard response. He'd say, "Sure, I might be interested. Just do me a favor. Send me copies of your personal federal income tax returns for the last 3 years, along with a detailed history of your personal investment portfolio's performance over that same period."
He asked for their personal tax returns and portfolio. Seriously?
Absolutely. And then he'd add the kicker. "If you've made more money from your investments over the past 3 years than I have, I'll gladly invest with you."
Huh. I bet he didn't get many takers.
You can imagine. But the point wasn't really to hire them. It was a screening mechanism. It demonstrated his core principle. Demand proof of success. Don't just delegate your financial future based on a sales pitch. Operate your household finances like a high-performing business, demanding evidence of competence from anyone you entrust with your capital.
That's powerful. Okay, final piece of the offense. Choosing the right occupation. We touched on self-employment being key.
Yes, the correlation is undeniable. Self-employed individuals are about 4 times more likely to be millionaires than people who work for others. It's not just about potentially higher income, it's about controlling the capital generated by the business and having more options to minimize realized income and taxes through reinvestment.
And again, it's often those dull, normal businesses that produce the wealth.
Very often. The janitorial services, the paving contractors, the pest control guys, the auctioneers. These fields might seem unglamorous, but they often require specialized skills that create barriers to entry, face less intense competition than trendy industries, have stable local demand, and allow the owner to retain and reinvest profits directly back into the business, compounding wealth efficiently.
And the entrepreneurs themselves often see risk differently, don't they?
That's a fantastic point. Many employees feel owning a business is incredibly risky, but successful entrepreneurs often argue the opposite.
How so?
They'll say, working for someone else means you have one customer, your employer. If that one customer decides they don't need you anymore, your income goes to 0 overnight. That's risky.
Interesting perspective.
Whereas owning a business, maybe you have hundreds or thousands of customers. Losing one, or even a few, doesn't sink the ship. You have multiple income streams, diversification built in. They argue that owning the business, despite its challenges, actually gives them more control and, in some ways, less catastrophic risk than traditional employment. They embrace calculated business risk, because the payoff is control over their capital and their destiny, which ultimately builds immense financial confidence and courage.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what's the core message we want listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I think it boils down to this. In America, it's actually much easier to earn a lot of money than it is to accumulate substantial wealth.
Easier to make it than keep it.
In a way, yes, because our entire society, our culture, is geared towards consumption, towards spending, towards displaying status. Building real, lasting wealth requires consciously fighting against that tide. It demands playing consistently quality defense.
That relentless focus on budgeting, planning, strategic frugality.
Exactly. That defense isn't optional. It's the non-negotiable foundation that allows your offense, your income generation, and your investing to actually build something meaningful over time. You need both, but defense comes first.
So the profile of these prodigious accumulators of wealth, they consistently focus their time, their energy, their money on activities that genuinely grow their net worth. They live comfortably, maybe even a bit, boringly, well below their means.
Boring can be beautiful when it comes to wealth building.
Right. And they're dedicated to making sure their kids become independent, not dependent. They see money less as a tool for immediate gratification or display, and more as, well, maybe a report card, a measure of their discipline and achievement over time.
That's well put. Remember that quote from Mr. W. Allen, the super paw millionaire, who famously turned down a Rolls-Royce gifted to him?
What did he say?
He said something like, if your goal is to become financially secure, you'll likely attain it. But if your motive is to make money just to spend money on the good life, you're never going to make it.
Yeah.
The motivation has to be accumulation first, not spending first.
That really captures the mindset difference. So a final thought for our listeners to chew on. Consider Laura's story from the research. The real estate executive.
Ah, yes. She succeeded out of sheer necessity after her husband left her penniless.
Right. And she was absolutely determined not to ask her wealthy parents for EOC, even though she could have. She built her success the hard way. And even after she became affluent herself, the research noted she still insisted on flying discounted night flights whenever possible.
That initial struggle, that necessity, it instilled a deep, permanent respect for the value of every single dollar. Her financial courage wasn't handed to her. It was forged in hardship.
Exactly. So our final question for you, the listener, is this. If true financial independence, as this research suggests, partly means developing the mental strength, the courage to resist status pressures, to embrace discipline, and to weather financial hardship, what economic struggle, however small, are you currently embracing?
Maybe it's finally ditching that expensive car lease for a reliable used car. Maybe it's choosing the slightly less prestigious but more affordable neighborhood. Maybe it's rigorously cutting your monthly consumption budget by 15% and investing the difference, even if it feels tight right now.
What deliberate financial hardship or discipline are you choosing today that is actively strengthening your long-term financial courage and building your foundation for genuine wealth? Think about that.
Mull that over. We'll be back with another deep dive soon.